Welcome to another episode of The Heart of Law. My name is Mirena and Mike, founder and CEO of Mirena and Company. On the show today, I have a Hall of Fame trial lawyer that has made some of the most outstanding contributions to our social justice. You can find his handprint in the Ohio River Valley fighting for people exposed to toxic chemicals in the air they breathed and the water they drank, securing a $920 million verdict, all the way to Northwest Florida, establishing a river keepers program known as the Emerald Coast Keepers, alongside people like Robert Kennedy, to the environmental class action against DuPont in 2007, resulting in a $380 million settlement. His name is Mike Papantonio, who goes by Pap, a senior partner at Levin, Papantonio, and Rafferty, one of the largest plaintiff firms in the country today. Welcome, Pap. It's good to have you on today.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Maureen. I appreciate it.
From your last name, I gather you have an Italian heritage. Is that right?
Yeah, I do. Apparently around the area of Lake Como from the last information that I had. So okay. I can't verify, but that's what I'm told.
Good. So if I spoke to you a little bit in Italian, is that
then I would just I would then look at you like a monkey watching television. I would have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, but I'm sure you love Italian food. So.
I do. I absolutely do. Yeah.
Good. Well, a lot has happened this past year, Pap, and a year and a half, I should say. And we've had a devastating pandemic. You lost your partner and good friend, Fred Levin, earlier this year. How has your firm evolved with all these changes?
Well, of course, the loss of Fred was awful, but at the same time, what we've tried to do is keep innovating. I mean, if you recall, after COVID hit, within 2 weeks, it was very clear that everybody was going to be kind of in a lockdown mode. We started MTMP Connect. And the success of that, I guess, has been phenomenal. I mean, it's just 500, 600, 700 people showing up for these Connect programs. So my point being is sometimes you're faced with having to make decisions that are a little outside what you're thinking about every day. Okay. And that's what COVID actually pushed us into. It actually made us become more creative. And that's what happens a lot of times. You either shut down, I don't care what business you're in. I mean, you either shut down under adversity or you create and you expand under adversity. And that's what we chose to do. We've expanded so much. We now have this program out of Connect called Face to Face. And what that is, Mirena, you can relate to this because sometimes you're in Vegas and you want to say, hey, Pap, let's sit down and talk. And it's impossible because I've got 2,000 people coming from every direction. And so Face to Face actually came out of that too. As a matter of fact, my daughter, who started working with us this year, came up with the concept of face-to-face. So it's always this idea of saying, well, I can do better no matter what the level of adversity is. And I think that follows folks the entire life. If you look at their trends, if you look at this law firm, the trend of this law firm, when everybody thought the tobacco case was impossible, Fred Levin, who you just talked about, dear friend and just a terrible loss to this firm. He was thinking, well, everybody says we can't do this, but we can. Yeah. And between him and myself and several other folks, we structured something that worked. So it's a matter of saying it's really easy, Mirena, to get into the same mode where all you're thinking about is what you're told to think about. And I don't mean told directly, but the nuance of being told. Daddy did it this way. Neighbor does it this way, and therefore this is the only way I can do it. It's really dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of firms, really, this was a wake-up call because they had been doing things a certain way for so long that they didn't have the understanding of how to reinvent. So you've gone through so many changes and you're just an innovative type of person. when the opportunity, right, presented itself, it was like, okay, how can we adjust? How can we do this better? And that's very valuable.
And I think that's something that really important for young lawyers to understand, because they're almost inundated with this idea of this is the way it's supposed to be done. 1-800 car crash, give me a call, whatever it may be. And they're told that all you can do is auto cases, all you can do is comp cases or medical mal. And the truth is, if they'll just look up a little bit, just take a minute, take a breath and look up a little bit higher, look up to something that is not the norm and try it. It will change. Not only will it change the financial aspect of their practice, but it will also change their excitement in their quality of life as a lawyer. You start doing something the same way and you look like everybody. There's nothing that is rewarding about that. There's no quality in that. And so that to me is kind of our mission statement around here. Anytime we're too comfortable, we start really freaking out. We don't want to be too comfortable. We want to be uncomfortable just a little bit and keep us moving.
Yeah. Well, you've accomplished so much and you're still in the prime of your profession. I know you from seeing at so many legal events, and I also hear what people say about you. I see the results. I see your books, your publications, your contributions. I see you educating young lawyers. I see you in action and you embody change. You embody innovation and strength. Where do your core values come from? Your creativity, your discipline, your competitiveness, the heart of law. Where does that come from?
Yeah, I think it has to start before law. It has to start way before you become a lawyer or even start law school. You have to have some vision about what it is you want to try to accomplish. My first inclination was to be a journalist and a foreign correspondent. That's what I studied at University of Florida. They had a program, news editing, and most of those folks in news editing would end up going into some kind of foreign correspondence business. But that was about one of those core things, right? It was one of those core decisions that, I don't want to go to work for a bank. I don't want to work for a corporation. I want to do something that at least moves the ball from a cultural standpoint in a positive way. And fortunately, or unfortunately, either one, I guess fortunately, because so many of my friends that ended up doing that, I don't know, that it's a tough business. Journalism is a tough business at that level. So, but fortunately, I ended up in this area, and I felt like I could take exactly what I wanted to do as a journalist and simply apply it to being a trial lawyer. Trial lawyer, the whole heart of a trial lawyer is to be able to think in terms of different ideas, sometimes different cultures, even different languages, and be able to bring all that to bear with a jury of 12 people. And so to do that, you have to have a fairly expansive background, right? And so I think that's something I always tried to do. I read everything from Steinbeck to Kafka to Fitzgerald or whatever. I read it and I understood it. And I understood in all that is where I should develop my core values, right? How do you read Grapes of Wrath and walk away from that and say, wow, that had no impact on me? It's impossible. You see, you have to say, I've got to help those people when I have a chance to help them. Steinbeck helped him through words. So my thought is, well, I can help him in a courtroom.
Yeah. So how do you promote people? I feel like back in the day, people would read. That was the source of information, and reading a book. There's so much value in reading a book because you can sit with it, with your thoughts, touching the book, going back, highlighting. People don't really do that as much. It's just the world is so hectic. Everything is online. People just read the summary of a book, or, how do you try to preserve that eagerness to learn and soul to
whatever it takes, Marie? You know what we do around here? We actually have a book club.
I love
where
it.
our young associates and our young lawyers,
Yeah.
they have to read 1984, they have to read The Fall, they have to read The Old Man and the Sea, whatever it may be. And then we all get around and we talk about what's the relevance of that? What's the relevance of Mice and Men? What was that about? How does that have anything to do with what I do as a lawyer? How does it have anything to do with the way I relate to a jury? And I tell the jury, you can't lie to a jury, Mirena. They have to either see that's part of it, of who you are, or it's not. And you can't really put on a show. Yeah. And so when you talk about the haves and the have-nots, which is the Steinbeck thing, the grapes of wrath, you have to understand that, and it has to project, and they'll see through it if it's not genuine. So what we do with our young lawyers is simply part of it. We interview, and it's very troublesome to me, but we'll interview young lawyers that come from elite law schools and, graduated at the top of their class, and they're great writers. And you ask them that, well, let's sit down and talk about Kafka. Yeah. They don't know what the hell you're talking about. They've never read the trial. Yeah. So you can't even carry on a conversation about things that matter beyond what they think is important in their tiny little cultural definition of what a lawyer should be.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember reading Kafka back in Albania. I was in high school. It was mandatory reading. I remember reading the Metamorphoses, and it was very unsettling to me for years. Because I could not come to grips. And it was one of those stories that stays in the back of your head, and it plays in your subconscious until one day you have an aha moment. And so I think that's to say that sometimes in order to be a good lawyer, you have to be a seeker, somebody that wants to develop their spirit, their identity, their personality, that there is more to just being a lawyer. Is that something that you can teach someone, that the eagerness and the hungry to be, to self-develop so that you can be your best person?
Some people you can. Unfortunately, I don't know, when I first started practicing law, I don't know how I got into this niche, but I was giving speeches all over the place about the imbalance of quality of life. And I was a kid, but I remember looking around me, and I just saw all these terrible stories. I saw lawyer had been married 5 times, lawyer is alcoholic, lawyer went through, had $100 million and blew through it. Now he doesn't have anything. Lawyer gets in the fist fight over nothing, all this stuff, loses his license, her license. And I'm going, my God, somebody needs to talk about this. So first book I wrote was a book called In Search of Atticus Finch. And frankly, it really wasn't a very good book. It was simply a compilation of my thoughts that I'd been talking about, and I put it together quickly. But in there, what I did is I was able to send out questionnaires to about 2,000 lawyers all over the country. And they came back. And then I was able to take the results of those questionnaires and give them to two very capable shrinks who spent a lot of time trying to understand what did this mean. And they were fascinated by it. I mean, they were absolutely matter of fact, one of them went on to study it more and write more books about lawyers. But here's what I found. One thing that goes to what you're talking about is in order to maintain a quality of life in anything you're doing, you have to have all these moving parts. You see, you have to, maybe it's music, maybe it's art, maybe it's you're a writer, maybe it's whatever it is, that has to be brought into your life, and you can't live singularly as a lawyer. That can't be your only identity. And what we found was the lawyers who were incapable of doing that or were unwilling to do that, on the scale of quality of life, they were down at the bottom, and you'd find another lawyer that he's not making the same amount of money, but he's a scuba diver. He's a deep sea fisherman. Does all of this stuff. Yeah. And their quality of life was way up there. So and it's our fault, you see, it's our fault. because there's so many lawyers that are these corporate defense freaks, right? So they come out of school, they graduate at the top of their class, they're a great writer. You would never want to spend more than 10 minutes having a drink with them because you can't talk to them, right? Yeah. So they're almost like veal. They put them in these little cubicles, and they stay in these cubicles writing all the time. They never grow. They're little veals, you see. And unfortunately, that's a big part, numbers wise, of who we are as lawyers. It's these characters that are, they get out of law school, they pay them a lot of money. We don't ever hear from them again. Yeah. They're in a cubicle somewhere, and so if I look at percentage wise, that's the vast majority of lawyers. What I do is only this much, you see. But I at least want to say to the folks that are this much to improve what you're doing, broaden your horizons.
Yeah. So you are an adventurous guy, and I've learned about you from other people. In fact, I have a good friend, dear friend, Chantrell Nix, who were having dinner one evening, and she said, I met Mike Papantonio. I went to his office, and he treats his people so well. He feeds them all the time. Yeah. And I went in there, and people just love him. They adore him. Everybody that works for him. It's like being in this job, and it's a calling for all these people. And I had the pleasure to sit by some of your staff at one of the events in Las Vegas. And somebody was sharing with me very, very briefly. It was loud and drinks were involved. But the story how you were flying a plane and almost crashed, and that's how you met your wife. Like, can I hear more about this?
Yeah, it's a true story. Yeah, in my earlier days, I was a pilot. I flew myself all over the country, doing what I do. Most of the stuff I did even back then was not in my hometown. It was somewhere else. And so, so I was taken off from, I was on my way to Jackson, Mississippi or someplace like that, taken off from the airport in Pensacola, right? And so on the air, the radio comes up. I mean, boom, woman with a real attitude. Traffic, 2:00, quarter of a mile, no traffic. I didn't see it. It was marginal VFR. I didn't see it. Traffic, quarter of a mile, 12:00, don't see it. And so all of a sudden, she just blasts me. Turn 030 now. So I dropped my wing, and a Bonanza comes screaming across me. The separation, maybe it was 50 yards. I doubt it, but it was the same altitude. So I land the airplane, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is called a near miss. It's an event that you have to fill out papers for. And I'm going, I had to leave. So I'd land the airplane, and I'm thinking, I'm waiting for the call, somebody to yell at me, come up to the tower and all this kind of stuff. Because this woman had such an attitude already. Mm-hmm. And so I don't get a call. And so I'm in a bar. Everybody, the pilots hung out there, air traffic, or they hung out because it was close to the airport. It was just everybody would get off, go over there and have a drink. Mm-hmm. And so I'm telling this story, I'm like Mr. Hero talking to these other lawyers, and other, not lawyers, but other pilots. And I'm doing the whole hand things and making it look like I did this phenomenal feat by avoiding the crash, which all pilots do. And so this woman is looking at me. She's really a fine looking blonde at the end of the bar, just glaring at me with some other controllers, and they're pointing, and I'm thinking, well, hell, they're pointing at somebody else. I don't know what's going on. So she comes up, walks around, and just stomps over there. And she says, are you the idiot that almost ran into the Bonanza? And it, of course, took me back. And I said, well, could you tell me more about what you mean about the idiot? What do you say? So we concluded that, yeah, I was the idiot. And I married her shortly after that.
Married the idiot?
Yeah, well, I married her. And so she married the idiot. And we've been married like 37 years. So it worked out pretty well. Oh, there's old Chinese proverb that, you gotta take care of anybody who saves you. So
That's right.
she's taking care of me. How about that? She's taking care of me.
It's such a great story. Your daughter, Sarah, joined your firm this year. Did you have something to do with her wanting to be a lawyer?
Not really. I didn't really push it at all, but she would always want to be in trial, wherever we were. She would come and say, Dad, I'd like to, watch your closing argument. I'd love to see your cross-examination. And she would go to programs, that I would taught where I would speak. And she saw that what I was doing was a little different. For example, I have an approach to something as basic as a cross-examination that is very unusual. It started all the way back to the asbestos days, and it's kind of our brand, Mirena. Yeah. Nobody takes a deposition, for example, unless they know this and can do this. And so she would watch that. And then she went to law school. She said, they never taught me anything like that. I said, right, but I never really pushed her to do that. She could have done anything she wanted to, would have been extraordinarily talented PR person. But she excelled in law school in trial competitions all over the country. She would number one or number two. She went to Stetson, and they had just an incredible run of trial success. And so she was kind of ready-made when she came out. And so then the question is, okay, what do we have to add to that? Well, we have to add our brand. You need to understand our brand. It's different. And so, yeah, she's been just incredible, not surprised, but just rewarding. She's taken some of the most important depots there are in Valsartan and Zantac. And so it's just really, it's real meaningful to any father to watch that.
I was going to say, you must be a proud papa.
I am. Yeah.
So you are the founder of Torts Made Perfect, a cutting edge conference that trains thousands of lawyers to better their legal practice, to diversify. It's one of my favorite conferences, events of the year. How did you come up with that idea? How did that all start?
Well, it really evolved. Little known story. It's just, I guess people know more about it now, but John Morgan and I were roommates at University of Florida as undergrads. So both of us came up just dog fighters. I mean, we didn't come from, we weren't the fraternity class, even though we were in it. We just weren't part of that scene, because we were worried about how do we pay for college this year? How do we survive? And so he was, as soon as I met John, I said, wow, he's definitely a survivor. And so we became friends, and so when I got out of law school, I went to work, ended up with this law firm. Law firm had been around, it's this law firm's 67 years old and started by Reuben Askew. That's how old it is. So I was doing something totally different from what he was doing. He was in Orlando, and he was doing I think he started out with a defense firm and then started doing auto, comp. And so we talked about, well, let's try to do something together. So we put this program together called Practice Made Perfect. Practice Made Perfect. And so we would show up in places like Atlanta, and we'd buy a half a page, come into town, Mike Papantonio and John Morgan, and nobody had a clue who we were. I mean, who are these guys? But we're talking about how to build a multi-million-dollar practice, because we're kind of already on our way to doing it. We knew what we had to do that. Or we'd go to LA and San Francisco, and there'd be 50 people there. You never knew what you're going to find. And if it was a small turnout, 15, 20 people, I'd always let John open. If it was, we'd argue about who's going to open because there's only 15 people out there. If it was a huge turnout, I love to open, like a bigger crowd. And so out of that, we kind of went our different ways. But out of that spun MTMP. You see, I just took that and spun it into MTMP.
Wow.
But, it's just a mixture of creativity. It's, John had written the book, well, that came later, but the point being, he was just like me. He understood that you have to do extraordinary things
Yeah.
to get extraordinary results. You have to take extraordinary chances.
Yeah. I'm a woman that follows the energy, and I practice meditation. I'm all about energy. And when I walk into your conferences, there is this energy in the air about opportunity, that there's abundance. There is this feeling, people come, they're so excited that there's all these lawyers that are single event attorneys that are coming to one of your events for the first time, and you meet them and they just feel like they're awake, like, wow, there's something happening and exciting. And they just can't believe it, that this has been a part of law that they've never explored before, and they're hooked. It's like one of those things that you go once or twice and then you're hooked. And I think that is what the essence that you've breathed into these conferences.
Well, thank you, Mirena. That's very nice of you to say. That you have to generate the energy because you have that energy. You have to generate the energy because you believe the energy. Yeah. Look, I want you to think about something. Just, you've been to so many conferences, both NTL and MTMP, and I own 50% of both of those. But what I have always tried to do is to take the people that can create that same kind of movement and that same kind of explosive feeling about being in a room. Yeah. And I don't care if they're a competitor. I mean, I will put competitors up on stage. I don't care. Yeah. My only question is, are they good? Have they distinguished themselves in any way that needs to be known about? Yeah. And I tell my young lawyers will say, Pap, why are you putting these people, they're competing with us on the same project? And I have a saying that is kind of known around here, and it's called turning your back on the bull, right? And that means if you don't have enough confidence in who you are and in your ability and in your foresight and your vision, if you don't have confidence in there, you will never turn your back on the bull. A great bullfighter does that. Hemingway did such a great job talking about this. He studied bullfighters forever. Yeah. And he said, there's that person that has that aura that just is a little creepy sometimes. Yeah. And they're willing to turn their back on the bull. Yeah. You have to do that with competition. Yeah. And so what brings the energy is that I don't care who they are. Yeah. They could be my worst enemy. Yeah. I hope I don't have that many, but maybe I do. Maybe they don't tell me they're my worst enemy, but I put them on stage anyway, you see. Yeah, and I'm saying, all I want you to do is create this message that everybody in that room can do something extraordinary.
Yeah, and because you're seeking to really make social change. It's not about you. You're not obsessing about you or your business. You're obsessing about bringing social justice by pursuing human trafficking and opioid litigation. So you've helped create a blueprint for mass tort firms. You've done things organically over decades. Today, third-party capital has entered our space in a very big way and changed the landscape in the last 10 years. You can find many law firms around the country that have over 50,000 cases in their inventory, and it takes them less than 5 years instead of 10 or 15 years. What is your take on that? Are there things that worry you about that? Yeah, there are.
Well, okay. The thing that worries me is it's different. God bless them. They're spending the money. They're signing up for the risk to go get the cases. Yeah. But they still have to be engaged. You understand? Yeah. Here's the perfect example. Take Roundup, for example. If you were to look at Roundup, there were about 4 of us that Monsanto came to very early because we were taking depositions. You had California going on. They were doing it. I was doing it down in East St. Louis, taking, attack depositions. And they weren't, they were kind of bloodbaths. The company wasn't doing that well. Perry White's was doing his thing with Robin Greenwald. And so what ends up happening, and this is more and more developing as the MO, the company comes in and they settle with me. They settle with Perry. They settle with Mike Miller, whoever it may be. They get them out of the picture. And then they pay us 5 times what the other lawyer gets after all that's over. Now, what do you do when you have a client that's reading the paper, or they have a neighbor and they said, well, I got $250,000 for my claim. And it's exactly the same claim as the neighbor. And the neighbor says, well, I got 35,000. What happens there? You see, it's just a matter of time. I mean, after all this started happening around, I got more calls for lawyers. I mean, not from lawyers, but from people wanting to sue lawyers. Yeah. I didn't handle any. I will not handle a malpractice case unless it's very clear. So I didn't handle any of it, but they were calling and they were saying, what's going on here? Yeah. The problem is you have to be able to stand on your own feet. Okay. If you don't have a trial ready team that can go to trial in 3 different jurisdictions in a month, that can actually do a hell of a job, then you're really taking a risk if you don't understand the mechanics of all this. So, look, the attorneys that get the money from whoever it is, they go out and they advertise and they let people know this is bad. This stuff is bad. It'll hurt your child. It'll hurt you. And that's the positive about it. But then what about that client that has inoperable, fatal cancer? Okay. And they know, well, this person got $250,000 to $300,000 and they got $35,000. Right. You see the problem there. Yeah. So I have very mixed feelings about it. As you know, at MTMP and NTL, the vendors, I always say, are the heart of the program. You've got to have capable vendors that can talk to a lawyer and say, let me analyze your problem. Okay, Mary, you've got a cash flow issue. You can't do this project with the cash flow issue you have. So let me talk to you. Now, I will tell you this is, and I'm telling Joe DiNardo this. I said, Joe, what is it that you're missing? Okay. It's the same thing I see with lawyers, the same thing y'all are plagued with. You shouldn't go in. I mean, let me tell you the better play. If I were going to do this, I don't think I ever will. I don't have the interest in doing it, but I would go into a law firm. First of all, I'd evaluate, what's the law firm? Do they have a trial bench? Do they have experience in going to court? Can they do that if they have to? And you know what I'd say to them? I'd say, look, this is a great project. I'm going to give you this much money, maybe this much interest, but I want a big back end. Yeah. And what you're doing is you're simply taking the risk with them and you're making so much more money. I mean, the comparison is ridiculous. I mean, I've done the numbers. I've looked at what, say Fortress charges or whatever, and, what comes out on the other end. Had the same people just said, look, we got to deal with you. We got a lawyer in our organization. You're going to deal with that lawyer so you can share fees. There's no problem there. It's like being a referral counsel where you're making 40% while you sleep. Yeah. Now, you can't do it with everybody. I mean, you can't do it with some jackleg who doesn't know anything about mass torts or doesn't have the first clue about how to try a case. Yeah. But there are plenty of people you can do that with. And I think it's missing in this area really big time. And I, like I said, I've thought about doing it, because it would be a different model. I'd simply come in and say, we don't want whatever. I don't even know what the percentages are. I swear. I know they're high and there's, points here and points there. And God, I'm working on a case right now, Mirena, where the lawyer has to be able to make X number of dollars before they can even make a dime. And so they can't even settle the case. Mm-hmm. They can't settle the case for these numbers. Who wants to be in that situation? But I don't understand why that hasn't been adopted. It should be.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard mixed feelings about that. And one of the arguments has been that if a fund is going to take a piece of the back end.
Mhm.
Now you have an outsider that's trying to determine the outcome of
Right.
litigation.
Very
And-
often a non-lawyer. Yeah.
A non-lawyer. And so I think therein lies the dilemma of whether or not, I guess the right people need to be doing that model you're talking about specifically. But
Yeah.
Utah and Arizona now, where lawyers and non-lawyers can share fees,
Right.
it's going to be a free-for-all, right?
Well, it can be. I don't think your better lawyers are going to get sucked into any of that. They don't have to. But there's a real danger here, man. I mean, isn't it like going to a doctor and the doctor says, you really need this medicine,
Mm-hmm.
and then having some cat who's not even a doctor saying, no, you don't. I mean, isn't that the same thing? Hey, Joe, you really need to settle the case for $250,000. Some cat on Wall Street says, no, you don't.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at, look, full disclosure, I'm just looking for the right case.
Yeah.
And when I find it's whoever, it's like musical chairs.
Yeah.
It's, because it's not just the lawyer. You understand when you acquire an equity interest, in a sense, it's an equity interest. You might just say, no, it's not. It's an arm's length loan. There's all kinds of ways to get around that. And before you know it, you get some Wall Street firm that's on the hook for malpractice.
Right. It's like anything else in life, right? It has to evolve. Things have to the dust has to settle. And I think a lot of people get washed out or washed up, making a lot of decisions very fast, not consulting with the right folks about whether or not they should be borrowing money, at what term, and who to partner with. Because if you're going to be a passive investor, then you better, sign up with the best handling firm in the country.
And that's easy to do. That's easy to do. Yeah, right. It's easy to do. Just say, look, here's the scale. These people did this. They did whatever it is. It's just a little due diligence.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, my follow-up question, since we're pressed for time, how can the practice of mass torts be improved for the clients? Because it's hard to deny that you can't give the same quality of service and attention to a mass tort claimant as you do to a single event client, for example. Yeah,
there just has to be more trained, capable trial lawyers running the program. That's just, I hate to oversimplify it, but that's just the truth.
Yeah.
You got to have more trial lawyers that are willing to, put everything on the line and go to trial. And it can't be this gaggle of people who, yesterday they were doing divorce work and today they think they're a mass tort lawyer because somebody's giving them $50 million to go get cases. It's very destructive. And the people at risk, I know, I can't say this enough. The people at risk are those lawyers that don't understand this.
Yeah.
It's just it's real iffy.
Yeah. You're working on incredible projects, and there is many. Is there any one in particular right now other than opioids? I know you're pretty fired up and ready to go. And is there anything else that you're completely invested on?
Yeah, of course. Right now, from a personal standpoint, I'm devoted to PFAS, which is the 3M case, human trafficking. From a case that everybody ought to be paying attention to. It's valsartan, it's mesh, it's Elmeron, some of these smaller kinds of things. You don't have to do Zangel, whatever it is. You don't have to have these massive projects to be a success in this business. There's so many projects out there now that we're going to be talking about in August when everybody shows up in Vegas that they've been creeping up and nobody's paid attention to them, right? So there's a lot of them. Paraquat is one that I'm paying attention to because I tried some of the first welding rod cases where Parkinson's disease was the injury.
Yeah.
So this is the same. This is the equivalent, only it's worse.
Yeah. I know we're pressed for time, and I think we're going to have to do a round two at some point in the future. But Look, with careful searching and focus, you've used your time to sort of tip the balance towards opportunity, enough that life is exciting, worth living, despite its fragility and the suffering, right, that we experience in this lifetime. I'm sure that the adventures of your life have been frustrating or disappointing or unsettling, but also very exciting. But you've changed, you've sort of charged yourself towards conscious, and you have shouldered this responsibility to leave the world a better place than you found.
Thank you for that, Mirena. That's a very nice compliment.
Yeah, you are the heart of the American law. Thank you for all that you are, for the man that you continue to become. Until next time.
See you in Vegas, okay?
See you soon. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Mirena.